right, that's enough being friendly. Sit down, get your talk notes out. Let's get this done. Happy New Year. You know what bothers me when people say Happy New Year's? Is it apostrophe S? Is it plural? Are you wishing me a plurality of Happy New Year's? What's happening here? So I don't like that. How many of y'all had a decent Christmas? Raise your hand up nice and high. You just at least go with decent. I'm not going to go with good. I know, but hopefully I can include everybody with the word decent. Good. How many of you opened up a Christmas present this year and your face did not match your thoughts? But you did it pretty well. So like your face was super excited and maybe even your words were excited, but in your brain you were like, where do I return this without offending these people? Did you have any of those gifts? Anybody? Raise your hand. Just be honest. Did the person who gave it to you, are they with you here in the room? Do we need to have confession? How many New Year's resolution people do we have in the room? You just love to disappoint yourself. It's your favorite thing. No, listen, like in the room are a variety of ways of thinking about the new year. How many of you just in your life in general are planners? You're a planner. You like planning. Like you plan your vacations to the second. Like it's not a vacation unless you have packed in as much fun as possible. That's who you are. Raise your hand up nice and high. And if anybody's with you and they can't get with the plan, they are ruining your vacation, right? Absolutely. Now, how many of you, when you go on vacation, you don't plan a second of your vacation so that you can maximize your relaxation? Raise your hand. I like that. Yeah, right. That's kind of the way I vibe on vacation. I'm like, whatever comes my way. How many of you are somewhere in between? You're kind of like, I'm in between. I like a few things, but don't pressure me. Don't pressure me, right? We all have these different personality types when it comes to things like planning and when it comes to things like New Year's resolutions. And we all have different character strengths and makeup, right? And the reality, some of us are risk takers, and some of us are comfort seekers, right? Some of us love risks. We just are like driven to live life to the fullest, no matter how risky it might be. And some of us are like, I got to figure out how to just live in the comfort zone. And I don't think one of those is right or one of those is wrong or one of those is good and one of those are bad, right? It's just we're different. And some of us, most of us like adventure of some sort, right? Right? I mean, we're adventurous in our own way. And some of us are adventurous by following the trail, right? Staying on the trail. And some of us find adventure by blazing the trail, right? Who are my trail blazers, right? Like you're going to mark the path out, right? How many of you are trail followers? Like we're going to get to the summit and enjoy the view. Everybody stay calm, right? Somebody starts to veer off. You like are looking at your GPS the whole hike. When that little dot moves like 6 feet off, you're like, hey, back over here. What's going on? What is wrong with you? We stay on the trail, right? So we find adventure in different ways. And the reality is some of us thrive with planning and some of us thrive with spontaneity, right? We just kind of love to take life as it comes our way and others like plan it out. We find ourselves in between. Now, here's the thing. Regardless of our personality, regardless of our strengths, we can be a person, right? We can be a person, whether we like adventure on the trail or whether we like to blaze the trail, whether we plan or whether we like spontaneity, regardless of those things, we all have to make a choice. We can be a person that is created by the future, or we can be a person that creates our future. Right? We can live life in such a way that the future happens to us, or we can live life in such a way that we happen to the future. And I don't know that there's an in-between on that one. And I don't know that necessarily one is right or wrong. But I think we have to make a choice. What kind of person do we want to be when it comes to the future? Do we want to just be shaped by the circumstances that are around us? Do we want to live in such a way, in such a manner that, hey, whatever happens, happens, and I'm going to simply adjust, I'm going to react? Or are we going to look at the future and are we going to say, no, I'm going to happen to the future. I'm going to create the future. I would actually propose that the way of living that can produce more life, that can produce more energy and more excitement is to actually say, I'm going to happen to the future. Like I'm going to happen to I'm not going to just let the future happen to me. I am not going to be a person who is created by the future. I'm going to actively participate in the future. How many of you have ever just on accident found yourself on vacation? Just one day you woke up and you're on the beach and you're like, how did I even get here? Of course not. There's a lot of things that happen in our lives on accident. Vacation isn't one of them. How many of you have accidentally gotten a job before? Like that could happen. Like all of a sudden you're like talking to somebody and the next thing you know, you got a job and you're like, sweet, right? That can happen. Vacation is one of those things that like it's out there in the future. You got to think about it. You got to go for it. There's lots of planning to a certain degree, right? There are things in our lives that we actually have to actively participate in if we want to create a preferred future, a vision for where we're going. And that's really the big question today is where are you going to be at the end of this year? Right? We're right at the beginning of the year. Some of you are New Year's resolution people, some of you aren't. I get it. But here's the thing that I know. Like the majority of us in the room, we're going to have to, at the end of 2025, we're going to have to like look back. And we're going to look back and we're going to reflect and we're going to check the memories on our social media accounts or we're going to look at our calendars. And the question is, are you going to look back and say, hey, most of 2025 happened to me? Or are you going to look at 2025 and say, yep, things happened to me that were out of my control, but boy, I happened to 2025. Like I created 2025. And there's these key areas of our life that I want to encourage you as you kind of launch into this year to think about. So we have sectors in our world, right? A holistic way of thinking, right? So you've got your health, your physical health. You've got your mental and your emotional well-being. Right? Will you be proactive? Will you happen to that? Will you create that future? Or will you just say, well, whatever happens, happens to my health? Generally speaking, healthier people, whether it's our physical health, our emotional health, or whatever, like the healthier way is generally intention is involved in that. Like, what am I doing to maintain, to grow in my health? Let's talk about finances for a second. Everybody's favorite topic in church. How healthy are you financially? Next week, we're launching a brand new series where we're going to be talking about how do we intersect our values with our finances. And some of you are just like, okay, I can take the next 6-7 weeks off. I am not doing a church sermon series on finances ever again. Well, if you're like familiar with me, you might hear some different things you've never heard before, okay? When it comes to God and faith and finances and money and all that stuff. And so we're going to talk about it. We're going to start that next week. But where are you going to be at the end of 2025 financially? What's that going to look like? What goals have you set? What have you thought about? What is healthy for you? How about spiritually? Like, how are you going to grow in your faith? How are you going to stay connected with the divine? How are you going to grow in that connection? What are your thoughts on that? Is it just that it's going, well, whatever happens, happens? Or is there some active engagement? And then we have our interpersonal relationships, the people in our lives. Will your relationships be stronger at the end of 2025 just by accident? Or will they be stronger because of intention and community? Right? What's going to do that? Are you going to be an active participant in shaping the outcomes in 2025 in these areas, or will 2025 shape them? Like, how many parents do we have in the room? Raise your hand up nice and high. Parents. You know, if you're a parent, you automatically get to go skip purgatory, like, because you fulfill that obligation. In this life, we call it parenthood, right? Now, listen. How many of you would ever tell your kids, like, hey, you know what? The best thing you can do in life, if you want to be successful, if you want to just live life to the fullest, just be passive. Just be passive. No reason to be active. Don't actively engage in your academics. Don't actively engage in school. Don't actively engage in saving. Don't actively engage in friendships. Just let it all come to you. Just you let it all, like how? No. It's the active reality. And as we think about this, our scriptures and our tradition actually speaks to this idea of planning and of thinking about how to get the most out of life. I want to look at 2 passages today. One, you're going to be shocked that I'm actually going to tie this into planning for the future because I'm going to talk about Satan. So everybody take a nice deep breath. Now remember, I'm not a moral theist, so when we talk about Satan, you might, and that's fine, but I'm not thinking about the guy with the horns that lives in our fanciful world. I'm going to talk about something a little more, what's the word? Metaphorical, okay? But I want to talk about two things that Jesus said that really can speak to the power of planning, right? So in the Gospel of Luke, Luke chapter 14, verse 28 through 30, Jesus is teaching and he gives this story. Well, it's not really a story. He just kind of gives this anecdote. And he says, listen, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Why they would want to build a tower, I have no idea. But he says, say one of you want to build a tower, right? You're going to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? Sounds pretty wise, right? Jesus says, if you wanted to build a tower, if you want to build a house, you want to build anything, you're going to sit down, you're going to kind of think through how much it costs. Otherwise, after laying the foundation, in other words, after getting started, and you find yourself unable to finish the work, the onlookers, the people around you, they're going to start laughing at you. How many of y'all enjoy being laughed at? Yeah, I do, but it's kind of part of the job, okay? But I prefer to people laugh with me, not at me. But, sometimes it's hard for me to tell, so I just go with it. Right? They'll just start laughing at you. And they'll say, this one, oh my gosh, what a fool. They began to build, but didn't have the resources to finish. Right? Jesus is like talking with people who have very little resources, remember his audience. And he's saying, listen, you can't just go for it. There's got to be some planning, right? Jesus is saying, listen, wise planning is essential for success. Wise planning, and it's the same is true for you and I. We're trying to build towers in our lives, whether it's a relational tower, whether it's a financial tower, whether it is a spiritual tower, a strong tower. We're trying to build that in our lives. I don't know anybody that wakes up in the morning and goes, you know what? Mediocrity sounds pretty good. Half a tower, let's call it a win. You know what? I would just love to feel like a failure my whole life. No, we don't wake up thinking that. A lot of us wake up with lots of desires, but it just kind of ends there because we're too passive. And Jesus is like, listen, before you set out to do something, you got to think through, what is it going to cost? And the truth is, I know this, building towers costs. Building towers costs. There's always a cost associated to that active engagement, to vision, to where you want to be in life. You want a healthy family, you want healthy finances, you want healthy relationships. Guess what? There's a cost associated with those decisions. You have to decide, what am I willing to do and what am I willing to not do? We always ask this question like, what do I want to start doing? Right? Some of the most powerful question we could ever ask is, what do I need to stop doing so that I can start doing? Right? If we're going to get the most out of these areas of our lives, we have to be willing to ask those questions. So Jesus is saying, hey, listen, you got a plan. How many of you have ever started something and then you got into it and you're like, uh-oh? Anybody? Yeah. Like, that just happens. You even thought you counted it. You even thought you sat down and counted the cost, and then like life happened, the car broke down, whatever it was, and then it's like, oh no, right? So there are things. And how many of y'all know sometimes you set out a plan, you sat down and thought about it, but one thing you didn't consider was you. You didn't consider your capacity to dig yourself into a hole, stand at the bottom of that hole holding the shovel, and blame everybody else. Anybody? Y'all are liars. You are liars. We all have done that. And this is where I want to talk about the other story that Jesus gives that's so great. In Mark chapter 3, the Gospel of Mark, Jesus says this. He's talking to him, and he's speaking in a parable. Okay? What is a parable? A parable is a story about a truth. It's not necessarily factual or historical. It is a story to teach a truth. Okay? So, this is going to upset some of you. All right. So just stick with me. It doesn't need to upset you, I promise. It really doesn't. If you just breathe with me. Okay. This is what Jesus says. Summoning them together, he began to speak to them in, what's the word? So get mad at Jesus, not me, okay? Get mad at Jesus. He's talking to them in a parable. In other words, don't take this literally, take it seriously, okay? He says, how can Satan drive out Satan? Right, so how can the accusing one, how can this like enemy drive out an enemy. Like, how does that do? He says, now here's the thing. When you hear the word Satan, depending upon your faith tradition, right? I grew up in a charismatic tradition that we bound Satan with words. We were like, we bind you in the name of Jesus. I have no idea what that did. Most of the time, nothing. Didn't change anybody's life, just felt really good in the moment, like we had some measure of authority because we said something. And then a person left in the same pain, in the same hurt, in the same addiction, because we were just like, we just got to bind Satan. But listen, I want to encourage us in this moment, just right here, just for the moment, like let's not think about Satan as a being, right? As an entity that exists outside of you, that like we could invite Satan to church and Satan could sit here with Vi and hang out and fill in his talk notes or her talk notes or their talk notes, whatever pronoun Satan uses these days, I don't know. Let's not think of it that way. Let's think of Satan as that which destroys peace in your life. Okay? So let's just suspend kind of the idea that Satan is an entity or a being, right? And as we read this, let's think about it as a parable. Okay, Jesus is saying there is a strong reality. There is something that persists in our lives that produces evil. And if we consider evil the breaking of peace and wholeness in the world, how do you cast that? How do you bind that up? And Jesus goes on, he says, because if a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom can't stand. Right? So basically Jesus is saying, listen, it's like this. If a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. So how does Satan work against Satan? Evil doesn't work against evil. It just exists. Because if evil was working against evil, then we wouldn't have any problems in the world. Everybody would have wholeness. Everybody would have everything they need. If there wasn't evil that persisted, if evil fought against evil, there would be no hunger in the world. Right? If evil, I'm going to stop there because I'm going to get in trouble with the inauguration happening. Okay, listen. So some of you got that. Some of you are like, oh, he was close. He was really close to lowering that offering today. Okay, listen. Now, listen, here's what Jesus says. He says, if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand. That's the end of him. That's the end of him. Now, here's the thing. Jesus is saying, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. And here's what I want us to recognize as we head into 2025. Now, some of us, myself included, some of us, we haven't dealt with the devil within us. We haven't dealt with the things that we actively engage in that continually move us away from our goals. Because if we're just sitting around waiting for that evil to go away, for that evil to turn against and turn on itself, and you know what? I should just stop. I should just stop being selfish. That's just not going to happen. That's not how evil works. Jesus is saying, no, like that's not how it works. Like the persistence of evil is real. The persistence of pain in our world, the persistence of the lack of peace, a lack of wholeness is real in our world. And as we think about the future, right, if you think of building that tower, right, there's all kinds of things, right, that are holding us back. And oftentimes they're our choices, our decisions, our living into our values, our not living into our values, our suspect behavior, our interactions with certain people or certain things. And so Jesus then goes on and says something very strange, right? He's talking about this context in this parable about the Satan, right? He says, but no one can enter a strong man's house to plunder his property. It's such a funny story. Jesus is like, if you're going to break in, okay, and you're going to steal from somebody, let me tell you how to do it right. Like Jesus had a dark side. You're like, whoa. Like, where is this coming from, Jesus? Like, do you have an appointment with your therapist? Maybe we should work this out before you start talking. But he's talking about Satan, right? He's like, you don't enter a strong man's house, plunder his property, unless you first tie up the strong man, then you plunder his house. And everybody's like, oh, Jesus, I think maybe it's a little hot here. Like, maybe you're a little frustrated. Like, what? What is Jesus getting at here? Jesus is saying, listen, Satan, evil, is not turning against itself. If you want to take and plunder that house where you're going, that thing that you build, whatever that is, you got to tie up, you got to bind up that strong man. You have to take that first, and then you plunder it. Right? Then you plunder. And this is where we get like the language in charismania of like binding up the devil. And, we pray these things. But here's the thing, like, I don't think that's what this is telling us today in 2025. I think as we've gone through things like the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution and the Scientific Revolution, like it should shape the way we interact with some of these texts. And we don't miss the truth of it. And the truth of it is, there are strong men, if I can use that patriarchal word, like Jesus is saying, that hold us back from our preferred future. That have, like there is one that steals, that kills, and destroys. There's that reality to us. And if we're going to get to our preferred future, we have to identify that strong man that's holding back, tie that strong man up, and plunder it. Then you get the goods. Then you build the tower. Then you get to the preferred future. So think about your health, right? What's the strong man in your health? Is it a lack of discipline? Is it poor habits? Not exercising? You love sugar too much like me? Not going to lie. I could eat some sugar. Oh man, I can eat some sugar. How many of y'all ever eat sugar and then you just sit there wishing you hadn't? Yeah, because you ate, I know. Like, sometimes I just got to get up and do some jumping jacks or something. I'd be like, oh, this was a bad idea. I shouldn't have eaten the whole bag of gummies. Not those gummies, like, it's probably not I shouldn't have said that. Gummy bears, Right, so there's a strong man there. There's a devil that's destroying, right? And I hate to break the news to you, but you're it. I'm it. Who do you think, like, the devil didn't make me eat that bag of trolley? No. Well, okay, yeah, but it was the devil in me. It was a sugar demon. It's all up on me. And I've tried to cast that demon out with words. I've prayed it, I've done it all. Like, get off me, sugar demon. Sometimes I call Wendy that too. I'm like, give me a space, sugar demon. No, I don't. Just kidding. I could tell you all needed some energy this morning, so I'm trying to give you some laughs to go with this, right? Plus, when you tell people they're the devil, you really want to make them feel good about it, okay? I hate to break the news to you, but you and I are just as much the devil as we are God. Like, there is the shadow side to who we are, and there's the light side to who we are, and we can try and make it not a part of us, and we can fight against it as if it's outside of us, but really beautiful, like, it's just never going to happen. We have to first accept that truth. It's just a part of who we are. I like sugar. And until I accept that fact, I cannot be a good traveling companion with it. Like, I have to own that. This is why folks that are in recovery get it. Right? It's not an identifier that says, oh, this has to define me and everything in, but it's just I have to own it about me. And as long as I try to say it's somebody else out there, right? As long as I try to bind up somebody else out there, I'm never going to get to where I need to go. I'm never going to build that tower. Think about your finances. What's the strong man in your finances? What's keeping you from getting where you want to go? Oh, well, it's my boss. They're not giving me a raise. Or it's those debt collectors. They're not like, I hate to break the news to you, but it's you. It's me. It's the choices we make. It's our inability to say no when we really want to say yes to that. Fill in the blank. What do you like to buy that you don't have the money for? Right? This is the truth. And it lives inside of us. And it's a strong man. Why is it a strong man? Because it keeps us from the preferred future, the things that we want. Our spirituality. There are strong men in our spirituality. Like, the devil is inside of us. We're distracted. We have the reality of past experiences that are painful, that we have to work through or not work through if we want to have healthy spirituality. We have a lack of intention oftentimes with our spiritual lives, right? These are things that exist inside of us. They are strong men, so to speak, that we have to learn to tie up. We got to get in control of those things. In our relationships, we live in a space oftentimes of unforgiveness. We neglect what we have to pour into those relationships. We don't communicate well. We don't want to be vulnerable. Like, what is that? Like, that's Satan. And I think we can actually overcome it if we stop blaming it on some being out there and we just start recognizing that it's a part of who we are. And we take some accountability for that and some control. So here's what I don't want us to miss as we head into 2025 and as I'm calling all of you little devils, okay? We're like, this was the weirdest church service I've ever been to. You're a guest this morning, like, I have never been to church and been told I was the devil and felt so good about it. Okay, listen, here's what I don't want you to miss. If we're going to be people who create the future and not who are created by the future, we need a plan today to deal with the strong man. Right? If we are going to create our future, we need to have a plan today on how to deal with the strong man in these areas of our lives. Right? In modern, non-churchy, non-Bible words, you have to figure out what is it that is a capacity blocker in your life? Right? What is it that is hindering your capacity for your greatness? That's how we would say that in non-weird churchy terms, but we're in weird church, so I got to use weird churchy terms. Right? The strong man, the devil, is the parts of you that are capacity blocking. And you're saying, I want to expand my capacity. Oh gosh, I just thought of a joke that would be really funny, but some of you would get it, some of you wouldn't get it, but I'm going to go with it anyway. If you want to live out the prayer of Jabez and you want to extend your borders, you got to figure out what's holding your borders back. And it's something inside of you, right? There's truth to that. There's some space in which we have to acknowledge, okay, there's a strong man that's holding me back from where I want to go because I have to believe that love doesn't want me to languish. And this isn't name it and claim it spirituality, healthy, wealthy, wise. None of it. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying there is a reality that why in the world would love, if God is love, if the divine is goodness and wholeness, and if God can even want, I'm not even sure about that concept, but let's say, why would that God want you to languish? Why would that God not want you to live a life of fulfillment and wholeness? I mean, Jesus said, I've come that you might have life and have it to the fullest. But there's some of us that we just kind of take this passive, we're like, well, I'll just pray about it. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with praying about it. But like I've always said, I would rather spend more time answering prayers than praying. Right? I want to be an active participant in my future. I want to be aligned with God's will and God's vision in Christ, in Jesus for the world, peacemaking. So I want all of these things to line up. But I have to first recognize I got some strong men in my life. There is that devil and angel kind of reality. So here's what I want to encourage you. As you think about this, as you go, okay, Ryan, I hear you, I'm the devil. Let's just start there. I'm the devil. Some of you are like, finally, maybe my spouse will listen to you. I've been saying that for a long time. Listen, you'll acknowledge that. Yes, there's a devil inside of me, okay? Metaphorically speaking, all right? We're not going to cast out the devil, demon. Listen, I'm going to acknowledge that. I'm going to identify it, and then I'm going to work to tie that strong man up so that I can plunder. Because that strong man's just stolen from me. That bad spirituality is just stolen joy from me. Those bad ways of thinking about money is just stolen financial freedom from me. Right? It's just, and I'm going to plunder it. I'm going to take it back, right? And so here's some things to remember in your everyday normal life. You are not going to be able to do it alone. You know how I know that? Because you haven't. Because you haven't. Because you're sitting here today and it's the same strong man, and you've tried to do it alone, and you can't do it alone. Because you don't know what you don't know. I don't know what I don't know. I'm a huge believer in things like coaching and education and continual growth, and you need to be with people and gain wisdom from outside sources. So don't try and tie up the strong man alone if you really want to get there. If you really want to build that tower, right? If you really want to count the costs, if you really want to get the most out of 2025, you got to recognize, okay, I'm not going to be able to tie the strong man up alone. It's very difficult physically. You ever tried to tie somebody up by yourself? Don't answer that, okay? Don't answer that. Just think about it in the movies, okay? Just think about it in the movies. You can't throw somebody in your trunk alone. You'll throw your back out. You can't do it. You got to have an accomplice, right? You need a ride or die person that all they ask is, where are we burying the bodies, right? That's what you want in life. You got to have somebody alongside of you, people with you can't do it alone. So you need coaches, professionals that can guide you into clarity and direction around an area of your life. Friendships, just people that are going to encourage you. right? They're just going to encourage you along the way, be your friend. They're going to listen to you. They don't know anything about what you're talking about, but they're going to be your friend and hang out, and they'll sip on the coffee while you talk about something you're working on and a goal you're trying to make. Education. We live in a world where education and information is so readily available. So finding those ways in which you can gain tools and address challenges as you're trying to build that tower in whatever arena of your life. Therapy. Get a helping professional, healing and growth through professional counseling. That's a great way to tie up a strong man in your life. And here's a word that I don't like to say in church because it's been so abused, and it's been like some of it, it'll be really triggering. So like in all seriousness, like I'm going to say this word and it's a little trigger warning, but we do at some measure have to have accountability in our lives. And I'm not talking about a person who judges you and holds you accountable to some weird standard that you never agreed to, and you're like, wait a second, why am I being held to a standard? Like, who gave me this? But people who will hold you accountable to your dreams. See the difference there? How many of y'all want to be held accountable to my dream for your life? Raise your hand up nice and high. John, I like it, John. You can hang out with me. John's like, maybe. Some Sundays, today not so much. I'm not the devil, right? Most of us don't want to be held accountable to somebody else's values for us, to somebody else's idea of morality. But we would love to be held accountable for the dreams in which we are holding for our lives. And that's the beauty of it. So we do need accountability, mutual support for one another in this arena. And I want to encourage you, as you're building your tower, as you're tying up that strong man, as you're working this, learn to celebrate progress no matter how small it is. We don't celebrate well. You got to celebrate the little wins that create the big wins. No matter what. So there's all kinds of benefits of celebrating, right? Celebrating builds momentum. You celebrate the little win, you're going to build momentum. And if you're, no matter how, and the bigger the idea, the bigger the dream, the bigger the goal, the more important the small celebrations are. Because if you've got this 5-year goal for your life, or 10-year goal for your life, or 20-year goal for your life, you better start celebrating that every month, the little things you're doing to get there, or else forget it. It's gonna get off the radar. That strong man is gonna untie itself, right? That sugar demon's gonna get all over you. You gotta learn to celebrate the little things. Hey, I went 6 minutes without a sucker. Yes. I didn't eat the whole bag of trolley. That's a real problem in my life, by the way. Pray for me. I got these Christmas ones in my stocking, and I was skeptical, and they were really good. And this is how sick I am. I spent the next 4 days going to candy stores trying to find that specific bag of gummies, and you could only get them in Europe, so it's very sad. You got to celebrate the little wins. Didn't eat the whole bag, right? Celebration reinforces the positive behaviors in our lives. Like when we celebrate the good things, right? We celebrate the successes. It reinforces that, gives us that dopamine. It'll increase our sense of purpose and self-esteem that we have. Because we know we beat ourselves up when we make the mistake. We know when we stick our hand in that bag of trolley and there's not one left and we're like, oh no, I did it again. We beat ourselves up over it. So we can celebrate and we can grow our self-esteem. And here's the thing I really want you to remember. 2 steps forward and 1 step back is still progress. And sometimes that's hard to remember. But 2 steps forward and 1 step back is still progress. And the truth is, anything in life that's meaningful, any goal that you set for yourself, any dream that you have, any tower that you want to build, boy, there's going to be setbacks. And we can either let those setbacks slow us down or stop us. They don't have to stop us though. But a lot of times they do have to slow us down. We'll have to hit the brakes sometimes, hit an icy patch. But I want to encourage you, as you are creating this preferred future, as you're living into your dreams and your hopes, and you're leaning into your relationship with God, as you do this, when you have those moments where there's a setback, whether it's of your own doing, the little devil showed up, or whether it's somebody else, and their devil showed up in your life, don't let it stop you. Because the difference between a person who finishes a marathon and a person who decides to run a marathon and starts, it's just one never stops. One never stops. You might have to walk some. I've run 2 marathons in my life. Well, run is kind of a misnomer. The first one I ran. The second one, as I was training for it, I got an injury. And being the person I am who don't really like to go to the doctor, YouTube was helping me out a lot. And I did go to the doctor, and I continued to train, but I didn't get the really long run in I should have right before that race. And I went out and I started running, and then I hit mile 18. And that was it. It was done. And I could not get going. I mean, it just, my knee, my leg, it was so bad. And you know what? I thought to myself, right, I could just make the call and have somebody come, but it didn't really hurt too much to walk. So I walked the last 6 miles, the longest 6 miles of my life. But I finished. And I didn't care that I got made fun of for my time. I rounded the last water station, and I was like, am I still in the lead? That's what I said. That's what I said to the person at the booth. She just looked at me, didn't know what to do. I was like, I'm still in the lead. I mean, there's nobody near me. I was like, I'm still in the lead, right? Sometimes you got to have fun with this stuff that, and don't take yourselves too seriously, but just don't stop. Just don't stop. If there's one thing I could just encourage you with your dreams, is just don't stop. You might not get where you thought you were going to be at the end of this year, but you can be closer to it if you just don't stop. And I know some of us in the room have a little bit of obsessiveness to our personality, so it's easier for us not to stop because we feel psychologically damaged if we don't stop. And some of you are way healthier. You're like, no, it's time to stop, right? So find a balance, right? Find a balance there. Maybe alter the plans a little bit. Change it. Adjust your timetables. But if you believe in that vision, and you believe it's given to you and it's sparked in you by goodness and by love, then just don't stop. And you know what happens when we live in that way? When we persevere, when we keep moving forward, even when we can't move any longer, when we're not sure how we're going to make it, when we've got to take a little break. Here's the thing. We're living to create the future. And when we live that way, we will create a life that is marked by accomplishment, a life that is marked by a positive self-esteem, a greater self-esteem, and we'll have a deeper sense of purpose and meaning. We'll know that our lives aren't about just getting up and getting to school that morning or getting up and getting to work and clocking in and out. There's something bigger. It's the why. Why so many decisions we make. I mentioned earlier that Jesus said, I've come to give you life and that you might have it to the fullest. And I have to believe that having dreams and desires and going after those and seeing them fulfilled in our lives, that's part of that full life. And then to take all of that stuff, right? And to line it up with a passion for a life grounded as a peacemaker. Boy, I just feel like, man, there's a way to live. There's a way to squeeze the orange juice out of that orange all day long and get the most out of it. So as we have communion this morning, as we wrap up, what is it that God's inviting you into today? I hope that you sense an invitation by the Spirit of God to think about one strong man in one area of your life that's holding you back from where you want to be, and that you create a plan to overcome it. That you figure out, here's the path. Because hope, by the way, is about having hope. The authentic science of hope says, not just that I hope something can happen, but I can actually see a path forward. When I can see a way to get there, then I have hope. If I can't see the path, if I don't have the autonomy to get there, I don't have the means myself, I don't have hope, I have a dream. Now I have hope. That's genuine hope. So create that path. Identify that one strong man. Maybe you've not yet thought about where you want to be at the end of this year. So pick an area of your life. You don't have to pick every area. Just pick one area that you're not happy with, that you're not satisfied with, that you have some dreams for, but you've never really thought. Articulate that, right? Think about, where do I want to be at the end of this year in this relationship? Where do I want to be at the end of this year in my spirituality? Where do I want to be this year at the end of this year with my financial life? Where do I want to be? Think about where you want to be. Visualize it. Do that exercise of just visualizing what does that look like? What would it be like to arrive there on January 31st? What would that feel like? What would that be like? Just sit in that. And then I want to encourage you, every person in here, every family in here, is to think of one area of your life and dream about 5 years from now. Just dream about 5 years from now, 2030. Pick one area, and together, if you're family, if it's just you, then just sit down. Like, where do you want to be in that one key area? Like, what's the 5-year vision? What's the 5-year dream? And then think, what can I do this year to start me in that direction? What can I do this year? Like get that plan. Like, where's the tower? This is the tower I'm building in my family. This is the tower I'm building in my finances. This is the tower I'm building in my spirituality. This is the tower that I'm building. And it's a 5-year plan. I got to get there in 5 years. That's the goal. And you say, okay, so here's what I can do this year to move forward. And guess what? It might turn into 4 years. It might turn into 10 years. Who knows? But it'll never happen if you don't start somewhere. So just get that idea. I want to encourage you to do that. And the truth is, the majority of you are like going to walk out of here and probably not do that. But I'm telling you, if you want to change your life, invest in it. Because I can't change your life for you. As much as I wish coming to church and listening to this dude could change your life, sorry, not going to happen. But you can, especially empowered by the spirit of love and grace and hope and a community and people that love you and you're sharing it. Oh man, you can change your life. And I think that's what we're called to do. I think that's what it means to tie up the devil in us and to move forward. So would you stand if you're able to? Communion is around the room. Everyone is invited. We have open communion. You don't have to go through a course or anything like that here. It's just, these are symbols of God as love poured out for us, and then we're nourished by them. And you are invited and welcome to the table. The body of Christ broken for you, the blood of Christ shed for you. You can be served at the side tables, the back tables if you're in the bleachers, or at your tables here this morning. And just consider, what is it that God's inviting me into this year?